Hey everyone, welcome back to Live, Laugh, Lies. It's your host, Susie Evans, and I wanted to come on here and talk with you guys before we get into today's episode because right now, as I'm recording this, the California wildfires are still spreading and it's a very scary and sad situation. Last Wednesday, I really thought that everything was totally fine. At least for me in my area, obviously there was devastation surrounding me. I was kind of surrounded by these fires on either side of me and above me, but I was in a particularly safe area despite seeing the smoke kind of fill the sky in a very scary, like looming way. When the Hollywood Hills fire sparked, it completely caught me off guard. I did not think that these fires were going to just start popping up everywhere. It seems like there might be arson going on. It's not just natural wildfires that are occurring. So that popped up and my area was just touching the evacuation zone. And so as we were packing bags, in a matter of like 15 minutes going out to the car and coming back in, it went from being a clear sky-ish to having smoke and particles in the air and being able to see the flames from areas of the neighborhood that we live in. So we decided to pack up and get out of here as quickly as we could and not risk it. We went to Vegas for 4 days or 5 days. I think I was there for five days total. I just got back last night and the wildfires are still going, but my area is safe for now. I'm just staying indoors, wearing masks when I have to go outside. It's unlike anything I've ever experienced before, and I'm really fortunate with where I live. I've seen videos and I've heard stories from people that I know that live in Brentwood, in the Palisades, in Malibu, have homes in Malibu, and it's like just absolutely horrific what people are experiencing. So we did not want to come on here and just drop an episode and not be considerate of what's going on. So we wanted to acknowledge it. And also our guest today, India Oxenberg, she was a member of the NXIVM cult, which is the topic of today's episode. It's a really interesting episode where we dive into her experiences with the cult. She gives us some like inside scoop as to what it was like to be in there and how to process trauma and things like that. But she also reached out because this is a lot for her that she's currently going through. And she's got lots of family in Los Angeles. She doesn't live here anymore. But in 2018, when she got out of the NXIVM cult, she lost her home to the Malibu fires. So seeing all of this come up again, I think has just been really upsetting for lots of people for lots of different reasons. It's very traumatic. It's very triggering. And we just wanted to come on here, acknowledge it, and, say that we're sending our prayers, our donations, our energy, and doing what we can to support people that need it right now. And we hope you guys enjoyed today's episode. I know it's a heavy time and 2025 has been off to a really bizarre start. So for anyone that's going through it, whether you're related to these wildfires or not, just know that it's been a really hard start to the year for lots of different people for lots of different reasons. So if you're listening to this, you're not alone. I'm sending you love and I hope you're doing well. And I hope you enjoy today's episode.
Everyone just wants to live, laugh, love. But in this disappointing world, there are many who are faced with lies.
I thought I was joining a self-help organization. It was being run by a psycho dictatorship. Ultimately, what it ended up being was a lie.
This is Live, Laugh, Lies.
India, thank you so much for being here today and welcome to Live, Laugh, Lies.
Thank you for having me. I love the title, by the way. I feel like it encapsulates a lot.
With a title like that, I'm like, really, there's nothing off limits.
Right, there's nowhere you can't go.
Yeah. Okay, so I have to be honest. I recently just watched the full first season of The Vow and then almost the entire second season, and then I skipped to the end before this interview to watch the final episode to know like the conclusion of everything. What a whirlwind. And I'm so excited that you're here to like talk about your experience. I want to know how it felt, obviously going through all of that, but also watching it back.
For context, The Vow is a documentary series on HBO that explores the NXIVM cult and its downfall. NXIVM was disguised as a self-help organization founded by Keith Raniere. It presented itself as a personal development group offering workshops and courses claiming to help members achieve personal and professional growth. However, beneath this facade, NXIVM operated as a coercive and abusive organization. India was one of the survivors who helped expose the cult. This is her story.
At 19, you joined a group called NXIVM. And for anyone who's not familiar, can you give a brief synopsis of what it was you originally thought you were joining?
Originally, I thought I was joining a self-help organization, which, consisted of classes and an education that was supposed to help you improve your entrepreneurial skills. Ultimately, what it ended up being was a lie, and it was being run by a psycho dictatorship that wanted to steal money under the guise of being good and credible. So it was a real harsh collision with reality for me about how people present themselves, what they what their intentions are, and what it actually ended up being was way worse than I could have ever imagined. There was a lot of abuse, there was a lot of thievery, and it was all being done under this veil of we're this, humanitarian organization here to help people, and we know exactly how to be better. And that's like super typical with cult or, high control groups. It's a lot of us versus them kind of mentality. So I didn't really know those things back then. I was only 19. So I wasn't as savvy as I am now, or like I had barely entered the world. So I look at myself in retrospect and I'm like, well, no wonder I didn't know about these things. But also, like, what would it have been like if I did know these red flags?
It's interesting because as I was watching the documentary, the first few episodes before they started to hint at there being some things that were not right, I very quickly was like, this isn't so bad. Like I fell for the same tactics that I feel like people who go into the program looking for self-help probably fell for. Like the first two episodes, I really was listening and I was hearing the information that they were talking about in these meetings. And I was like, this sounds like a leadership program I've been to before. This sounds like, a book I've read before. This sounds very similar to the curriculum of a lot of self-help and like improvement courses that are out there. And a lot of the advice actually, I think, was probably very beneficial, obviously, until you get deeper in and you realize that there was like so much more abuse, and it was just like there was a whole lot more to uncover. But at first glance, like the first two episodes, I was like drinking the Kool-Aid. And I'm like, wow, I would have been so susceptible to this had I found myself in a meeting the same way, wasn't it like 17,000 other people? Or how many people were a part of NXIVM?
It ranged. I think I heard that number at one point when I was in there too, that it was 17,000 members or something like that. But like at a given point, maybe like a couple hundred, maybe 1,000 globally were like active. And then that group got smaller and smaller in numbers as you got closer to the leadership. And like those were the people that really knew what was going on. And like you said, a lot of the information was just recycled self-help, regurgitated religion without a church, but still with dogma. So it's like, what's the difference really? When the delivery can be the same, but if it's coming from, nefarious intent, then you're being led in a direction that you might not want to be. And that's what I really didn't know. And it's been a major self-discovery process for me, kind of understanding what I was told and what I believed and how different that really was from reality.
Yeah.
I've had to definitely forgive myself and my younger self many, many times over, and I continue to do that. But I also feel like part of healing is saying like, okay, things happened to me that were not good. But am I going to let that define me for the rest of my life? Like, then you're letting the past ruin your future. And like, it's easier said than done. There's a lot of steps involved in like, healing and the continual steps of healing. But
Yeah.
it was kind of like a fuck you to them for me to live my good, like the best life that I could live. And I still struggle with PTSD symptoms. So it's like, what do you want to, which
Absolutely.
way do you want to put energy towards?
Absolutely. And you kind of mentioned at the beginning there were some red flags, and based on what I observed, it was like the goal of the organization was to gain your trust, to gain everyone's trust. And then slowly they start implementing these things that are inappropriate and abusive and controlling, manipulative, all those things. What were some of the early red flags that you did see that maybe you brushed off because there were so many positives to what you were experiencing, that you would maybe warn other people if you're joining an organization, like these are some things that didn't feel right, and I didn't listen to my gut?
That's a really, really good question. I mean, like, I haven't had that good of a question in a long time, because it's like, I'm going to take it out of the context of NXIVM as a group, because I feel like this is more relatable to just think about it like a bad boyfriend. And I feel like maybe, or a bad girlfriend, because I had both in there. And so I was just like, fuck, there's so many things that in retrospect were red flags that looking back, I was like, how did I not see that? And I think a lot of people can relate to that experience. And one of them specifically was that I was completely losing myself. Like, the India that went makes me emotional, not only because I'm breastfeeding, but also because it's sad. But the India that went into that group was not the same India who came out. And I had forgotten about my dreams. I had forgotten what was important to me. I forgot how much I loved and adored my family, how much I wanted a family of my own. Like, all these things I was willing to sacrifice for the acceptance and approval of this group. That's a red flag, like, if there ever was one. So, like, if you're in a situation where you're finding yourself slowly disappearing or wanting to like blend into the background, or lose your own personal ambitions or values, like, check yourself, because that's abuse, and like, it's hard to see it when you're in it.
Yeah, that's a really good analogy, because I think a lot of people in abusive relationships, whether it's something like this or, like you said, a boyfriend or a girlfriend, you start to disassociate from the people you love. You put aside the things that are important to you, and you're just focused on what the other person, or in this case, organization, what their goals are, and what they want from you, what they need from you.
Yeah, I mean, that's the first phase, is you start to isolate yourself from all the people and the things that, were your passions before. Next phase is you start to do that from yourself, to the point where you don't even know what you need anymore, and you're kind of just going with the flow in the wrong way.
Okay, are you one of those people that wakes up and is Googling your symptoms? Like, is this normal? Like, my eye is swollen shut, or like I've got a twinge in my neck, or like my stomach hurts. Like, I'm literally constantly Googling if my symptoms are normal, and most of the time it says no. That's just my reality. I know now, I'm like, I shouldn't be Googling. What I should be doing is ZocDocking, which is why I'm grateful and glad to tell you guys that today's episode is brought to you by ZocDoc. ZocDoc is an amazing resource. They help you find in-network doctors that can book instant appointments, like appointments within 24 hours sometimes. It's a really great resource. You can use the filters to kind of go through and find if it's an in-network doctor, the kind of doctor you need to see. You can look through reviews. You can find out more information about them. It's such a great tool. I can't speak highly enough about it. I'm literally 31 years old, and I'm like, were we supposed to know how this all works? Like, being self-employed and like having to figure out insurance, like, it's just so much sometimes. So I'm really grateful to ZocDoc. They make adulting that much easier. So stop putting off those pesky doctor's appointments and go to ZocDoc.com/live-laugh-lies to find and instantly book top-rated doctors today. That's ZocDoc.com, ZocDoc.com/live-laugh-lies, ZocDoc.com/live-laugh-lies. Were there any manipulation tactics that now are kind of obvious that looking back, maybe you didn't recognize?
Repetition. That's one that I feel like is really big in, religion, self-help, uh, breaking down somebody's kind of constitution, I guess, is you repetitively implant them with beliefs and fears and phobias that they may or may not be aware that you're doing. And that's a manipulation tactic that they used a lot in NXIVM. And like we had to repeat this mission statement over and over again. And there comes a point where you're just regurgitating these words and you think that it doesn't matter, but it really does. And it's it's impacting you on a subconscious level, whether you're aware of it or not. And I think a lot of what I wish that I could have blamed more on the group during my recovery was, why do I think so poorly about myself? Why do I talk shit to myself in my own head? Why do I think I'm a loser? And I wasn't even in the group anymore. I was out. I was free. And so, like, those beliefs and those things that I might have already been vulnerable to became worse for me. And then even after I left, I couldn't even blame the group anymore because I wasn't there. So I had to take some accountability and be like, hey, like, I don't want to live like this in my head anymore.
Wow. What was your life aspiration and your goals and your dreams? Because you were 19 and you were living in LA.
That's where I'm from.
And your family dynamic is really interesting. You're kind of like royalty, right? Like your ancestors are like royalty.
My ancestors.
And then your mom is like in film and television. It's like you're kind of like from this really cool, like iconic family. Were you planning to go down that route of like,
oh my God,
being in the spotlight and like being a star? Like were those things that were dreams for you?
For sure. I mean, like my childhood dreams were for sure about being a star. And and I didn't even really know what that meant. Like I didn't even know what I was good at. I was a little kid. I just knew that I wanted like to shine, whatever that means.
Yeah.
But I also felt like I never fit in because I did come from these really weird worlds, and my biggest fear was, oh my God, these girls are gonna think that I'm a spoiled little brat that isn't cool and is like aloof. And I had always like a lot of social anxiety around that kind of stuff, or feeling like I was gonna get kicked out of the cool club, not accepted, yada yada.
Right.
So I think like coming from those worlds made me feel like I stuck out, but not in a good way.
Right.
And I wanted to be like everybody else. And I think that was part of my motivation to even join NXIVM, was that I wanted to like test myself. I don't know, like I wanted to see if I was tough or like what I was made out of or something. And it just went too far. And I was obviously being psychologically manipulated, but you don't know that when it's happening.
Right. Do you feel like NXIVM used those dreams of wanting to shine, whatever that would look like? Did they promise you, we've got really powerful people, we have money, we have connections? Did they use all of those things to kind of lure you in and get you to stay?
It's funny because you would think that that is what they used, but they used that on the surface to enroll people into the group to make themselves look legitimate. Because people don't question celebrities, which is fucking crazy because they're just like everybody else. Just happen to be on TV.
Totally.
Just because you're surrounded by celebrities or people of status, or like nowadays, we didn't even have this when I joined, influencers. Like you don't know what the hell they're actually like. They're putting up a front that is for the screen, that's for likes, that's for followers. Like, come on. Sounds kind of weird.
Yeah.
But if they're a good influencer, then they're doing their job right. It just happened to be that these people in NXIVM were really bad influences and they were pretending like they were good. And what they used on me was my real core values, which are wanting to do good, wanting to help people, wanting to heal myself from my own past childhood wounds, wanting to, be philosophical and deep and know myself. That's what they used against me.
Right. Something else that really stuck out to me, and it was like, I believe I'm quoting this correctly, they really followed your mom a lot. And I want to get into that storyline as well and how that was mended between you guys and and all of that. But something that I found so interesting, my mom has always had this fear that I would join a cult, like accidentally. Like,
Really?
yes, since I was like a
Did she?
teenager. No, but I think I've always been very much like wanting to go deeper. Like I've always wanted to like challenge myself,
You want to be better.
be better. And like I've always kind of joined, like I've done leadership programs and I've done self-improvement programs and I've done some like sort of extreme things in my life, like not truly extreme, but you know, like
Ditto.
yeah,
I joke with my husband. I call myself. We're extreme. Like just like it's a part
yes.
of us as well.
Yeah, and it's such a beautiful part of who we are to want to like go deeper, understand ourselves better, become the best version of ourselves. Like I love that about myself and I love that when I
too.
see that in other people. But something your mom said like struck a chord with me because it reminded me of kind of my family dynamic where she said, India's the kid that I didn't have to worry about. Like she was so self-sufficient. She had it all together. She is so smart. She's beautiful. She's talented. She has everything going for her. Like how could this happen to her? And the two people that were kind of walking with your mom through this journey and trying to take down the cult, they were like, that's who they go for. Like she is the perfect target because if they can get her in, people are going to look at her and trust her and say, this woman's beautiful, smart, successful. She has everything going for her. And they're going to attribute that to this organization. And they're going to draw this conclusion that because you are in it and you trust it, that it must be safe. And so it really did kind of strike a chord with me because I've always thought my mom was so like bizarre for thinking that I would ever join a cult. But then I watched this documentary and I was like, you know what? I totally would have been susceptible to something like this. And it's almost like watching it, it's almost like people didn't know what was happening until they were too far in. And it was like people got so deep and this collateral damage that was like, you had to give collateral to gain trust. It's like they had essentially blackmail on everybody. It had to have been so hard to leave. While you were in it, did you feel like you couldn't leave, or were you drinking the Kool-Aid and you were like, this is really good and I'm really growing and I'm getting what I want out of this?
I think the saddest thing to say is that those two things can coexist. Like I felt and I believed both of those things at the same time because there was still a little part of me that like wasn't totally crushed, but like I didn't feel like I could leave. There was something inside of me that was like I have to stay almost, and that is part of the brainwashing because a lot of people felt like this weird guilt, like we owed it to the organization. Even before I had given the blackmail, I felt like that.
Wow.
After the blackmail, which was like the cult within the cult, things just got exponentially worse for me because that's when it like the real like the sexual abuse started and all of the things that are really hard to talk about. But even prior to that, I was already like stuck. But you're right about being used as a lure because that is kind of what I was used for. And because I had such low self-esteem and like didn't value myself, I thought that I needed this and their approval, to feel good about myself. And I just don't feel like that in my life anymore. But that was one of my vulnerabilities. Like, sure, I could be smart or pretty or funny or, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
But I still had these internal wounds that needed to be healed. And unfortunately, I, was involved in a really extreme situation that brought a lot to light for me.
Yeah. You said like the cult within the cult.
Yeah.
Do you feel like there were kind of two versions of NXIVM? The version that was possibly really rooted in self-help, and maybe were there people that didn't know there was abuse going on and they didn't know that what they were doing was hurting people, and they were unaware of the sexual abuse, they were unaware of the branding and the physical emotional abuse? Or do you think that ultimately it's one and the same?
It's a really good question. And I have been asked this a lot, and my feelings have changed about that over time, but there were certainly people in the group who did not know what was going on inside the inner circle. Let's call it that.
Okay.
But then if you like zoom out a little bit, everything that they were teaching was laced with perversion because it was coming from a pervert's mind. So like even if
Right.
he was teaching us something really like valuable and, on the surface morally good, it was for his benefit ultimately. So to me that kind of like rots the, like if the core is rotten, the whole apple is rotten.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how I see NXIVM. But like people have asked me even about how I feel about like communities and religion and things like that, and I'm like, those things inherently are not bad. Like there is a lot of good there. Like people crave community. We want camaraderie. We want those things. But if the leadership is corrupted, then it's corrupting everything. And like to me that is more of the problem than the actual like teachings or message or, church or community gathering, whatever. Like not every community is a cult. It's a cult if it's bad and it's intended to like manipulate and take away your free will.
Wow.
Make you a robot, basically.
Right.
That's what psycho dictators do. They want to turn people into commodities to serve their agenda. They don't give a fuck about you.
Wow. And for anyone listening, and I don't want to go too much into detail because I'm sure it's
Sorry.
very hard for you. Oh, no. Like I will take anything you will give us, but I don't want to make you uncomfortable or make you talk about anything you don't want to talk about.
I appreciate that. Like I feel like I've gotten to the place in my life where I can laugh about a lot of the things that were traumatic, which I feel like is a good thing because, live, laugh, lie. I think it's a lie to say that you can't laugh at the things that you've lived through.
Right.
You got to be able to make light of hard things, or else you will literally just wake up and cry every day.
Well, I'm glad that you have that perspective because I feel like that is something we lean on in this show a lot because a lot of people do come on with pretty wild stories. And if you don't find a way to laugh about some things, yeah, it will eat you alive. And I think that's life in general.
Totally. And it's not that I don't take these things seriously. I really do. Like, I've been spending the past 5-6 years of my life doing advocacy around this type of stuff because it really deeply matters to me. That still makes me really uncomfortable, but I do it anyways because I feel like every time I do it, I'm like affirming to myself that, that's my old life. This is my new life.
And also it probably fills that piece in you that was always seeking higher purpose, which I think is why people are attracted to organizations like this in the first place, is you're seeking purpose and you're seeking a way to help the world. And now you're doing it on your own terms, which is amazing.
Thank you for seeing me. I appreciate that.
Absolutely.
And one other thing I wanted to say is that
Yeah.
I've actually never watched The Vow.
Oh, wow.
I've never watched it because I lived it, so I felt like I didn't need to do that to myself again.
Totally.
But I appreciate it because I know it's out there and it's brought a lot of people out of the woodworks to go like, hey, maybe I was in an abusive group, or maybe I am in a group that's abusive and I need to get out. But I produced a 4-part documentary called Seduced
Wow.
that explores the sort of inside perspective of how somebody can be indoctrinated and brainwashed.
Oh my gosh, that's so interesting.
And you can watch it on Amazon Prime, you can watch it on Stars, and it's only 4 episodes, and it really explores my journey really intimately and deeply, but also other people who were inside of the group.
I'm going to have to watch that because
I'd love to know what you think.
Yes, I'll definitely watch it because watching even The Vow and hearing how many people say like, you don't think this can happen to you. We're normal people. We're successful people. We are not. It wasn't. And I know you've spoken and said, oh, I was struggling with my self-esteem, but so is every 19-year-old girl in the world.
Totally.
I'm 31 and I'm like, I'm still struggling with it. So it's like, it's
Same.
not like an uncommon struggle. So it's like this could happen to anybody. And I think that was like the theme that kept ringing true in the documentary for me. So I would love to watch the documentary you produced because I think this gave a really good outside perspective. And I would love to have the insight of how it really can happen and how your brain can, I don't want to say get tricked, but essentially get tricked into joining, believing, and participating.
Yeah. I would love to know what you think. Thank you.
Absolutely. I wanted to ask about your mom, Catherine Oxenberg. She played a critical role in your escape.
India's mother, Catherine Oxenberg, was a crucial part of exposing the NXIVM cult. Their collaboration with the FBI led to Raniere's arrest and eventual conviction in 2019 for sex trafficking, conspiracy, and racketeering, resulting in a 120-year prison sentence.
Watching The Vow and seeing obviously how invested she was, I feel like she really took this on. At one point she was like, I didn't realize like how much of this was going to be on my shoulders. Like she really just went for it, which was so impressive and so beautiful. Such a great mama bear. And I loved seeing that. But can you tell us the story of how she either helped you and how you kind of escaped the cult?
Yeah. It wasn't all at once. It took a while for my mom and I to rebuild our relationship because it had been severely strained and severed, really, from the group. And that was intentional because any kind of group or person who wants to possess you wants to challenge and take you away from any other loyalties that you have. And my loyalty obviously is to my mother. Like she's the only other person besides my husband and my now baby who I love more than anything in the world.
Yeah.
So that love for my mom, they obviously had to challenge that and they had to implement a lot of negative memories and a lot of negative information about my mom to get me to start questioning if she even loved me. And that's like a horrible thing for a child to do, but that's what parental alienation is all about, and that's what predators do. So it took a while, but obviously like our love is stronger than their evil conniving ways, and we won.
And the day that you decided or the moment you decided to leave, I'm sure you were probably very scared and
Oh, it took way longer than a moment or a day. It took way longer. Like, even though I was mentally, like, I was physically out, I was still mentally very in for a while until I
oh
started to
wow.
have collisions with reality, like the tapes, which you'll find out about in Seduced in the docu-series, because I talk about how I found the tapes and what the tapes possessed on them. And that was kind of like a awakening moment for me where I was like, holy shit, these people are bad. But like that took a lot of the same way that you have to indoctrinate somebody into something, you kind of have to indoctrinate yourself out of something. So some things happen in the moment, like they just happen, they change, your belief is changed forever. You can't go back to thinking the way that you thought before. Other things take repetition to re-believe the thing that you want to believe. So because they had implemented themselves as like God, basically, in my mind, all knowing, all seeing, God, I had to relearn like what spirituality was for me, what was good and bad for me, all these things that I had gotten confused while I was in the group.
Wow. And I'm sure with your mom continuing to reach out and have conversations with you, despite you not wanting to hear from her at some point and sort of pushing her away and pushing her away, it was really inspiring to see that she didn't give up and she wanted to save you. And she was
Yeah.
like, I know that something is not right. And that kind of speaks to the same thing you're talking about, obviously from a good perspective, where if somebody can see from the outside that something is very wrong, it's like, it's encouraging to not give up because it did work and you were able to get out eventually.
Yeah, my mom was the greatest anchor to who India really was outside of the group than anything else could have been, because there's nobody else who knows you more than your mother. That's the truth. I mean, they, were trying to pretend that they loved me more than my mom, and that wasn't fucking true. They were stealing from me and raping me. Like, that a mother knows when something is wrong with their child.
Right.
And I didn't know that then because I wasn't a mom. And now I do. And I'm like, holy shit, you have a sixth sense. You're like, where's my baby? There's something wrong with my baby. I need to be with my baby.
That's amazing. That just gave me chills. That's beautiful. And you were a key figure in the FBI case against Keith, who was the headmaster of NXIVM. What was it like to bring him to justice? And how did you cope with revisiting a lot of those traumatic experiences?
Oh, big question.
Big question.
Yeah. Keith, oh, I can't even say his name without like gagging a little bit. That was real. Oof. I was like, Keith, he's disgusting. He is
Truly
a person who deserves to be in prison for 120 years, which he is because of what we did as a group of people coming together. I was just one part of that process, and it was a really profound process for me. It was really hard and really probably the scariest thing I've ever done. To even read my victim impact statement, I was trembling. I had to take a beta blocker and like smoke some weed afterwards just to decompress. Like, I was like, whoa.
Yep.
I needed support.
That's a great combo right there.
Yes. For anxious girls out there, I'm not trying to like plug drugs, but like I needed help, and I had a lot
Absolutely.
of anxiety, and I've struggled with depression and suicidal ideation and a bunch of things that have plagued my mental health, and I've needed support in that. And this was just one of those really like accelerated times in my life when I was having to go to court, and like there was press, and they were saying very intimate details of experiences that I had had with Keith that I never thought anybody would ever learn about. So that was embarrassing. But then at the same time, I started to feel more and more free because I knew that I was going to be able to just tell the truth. And this is going to sound cheesy, but that the truth was going to set me free however long it took.
I love that.
It's like you have to believe that telling the truth, however scary it is and however shameful it feels, is going to be the thing that takes away the shame, even though it doesn't feel like it in the moment.
That's so true. So you've talked about how NXIVM instilled a sense of self-hatred, and I think that it gave this false illusion of building confidence and building self-esteem, but it seems like so many people experience this deep self-hatred and low self-esteem after being in the program for years and years and really buying in. So what has your life been like rebuilding that after getting out and moving forward with your life?
A lot of work, but work that's worth it, because I have to live with myself, and I didn't want to live with the asshole, arrogant version that was jaded and bitter. That's not me. That's not my essence. Like, I knew that that was just like an augmented version of myself that was in a lot of pain and really hated and just distrusted myself and other people. So you have to be willing to like challenge your own beliefs and maybe think that things could get better, that you could get better, that you're worth fighting for, because there was many days where I was like, I don't know why I'm even on this planet, because I felt so low. And
wow.
I have had to find like a lot more love in my life to be able to heal. And that also comes from myself, but it comes from the people I surround myself with. It comes from how I live. It comes from my husband. It comes from his family, from my family. Like, I've had to work to bring that back into my life, and to realize that it was also always there. It's been a really crazy journey, but I'm proud of myself now, and I wasn't before.
Wow. That's beautiful. I was going to ask you what's the biggest truth you've uncovered about yourself, but maybe that kind of answers it, unless you have a different answer. But I feel like
I think the biggest truth is that I'm allowed to have a good life. Like, I don't have to have I don't have to walk around with so much guilt and shame or even survivor's guilt. I'm allowed to like love living again, and that
Mm-hmm.
doesn't mean that I'm not honoring the trauma or the pain that I went through, because everybody goes through shit. Like, I haven't met one person that hasn't had a traumatic experience in their life that was challenging. It's just impossible unless you live in a bubble.
Yeah.
But I like myself a lot more than I used to, and that was kind of like weirdly my goal going into NXIVM. I was like, damn, I really don't like who I am that much. Like, I have maybe glimpses, but I wonder what it would be like to be somebody who actually liked themselves. And
Mm.
that's kind of been my goal, because you can't jump from like numb to normal per se. Like, you can't go from I hate myself to I love myself, because it's just not genuine. Like, you have to start with baby steps and be like, okay, I like
Totally.
this about myself, or I I proved to myself that I could work hard at this goal, and I appreciate that. And like, start with softer words, and then maybe you could get to like the point where you look at yourself in the mirror and you're like, damn, like, you're tired, but you still look hot. Like,
Yeah.
like that is kind of like the my goal state, and I don't always accomplish it. Like, sometimes I'm like, oh, no, not your best, but like, I've been striving. I've been striving to get there. Um, and trying.
Also, just in hearing you say that, I feel like I have to point out, like, I think you are going to be the most amazing mom, just coming from the experience that you've had. And I can just tell that you're such a, thoughtful person and you've put so much into rebuilding yourself and hearing how important it is for you to be aware of self-talk and being able to take yourself from where you were at such a low place, in such a dark place for years and years and years, and to be where you're at now and to recognize the biggest FU to these people is to go live the beautiful life that you have now. Like,
Yeah.
I'm so happy for you. And I'm like, I just know you are probably the most amazing mom. So
Oh, thank
I'm
you.
really just so happy for you. We have a couple more segments, but I wanted to ask, cults and abusive relationships both rely on the same playbook: manipulation, isolation, control. What do you think people should look out for, or just even tips on trusting your intuition? What are some things that you can offer people?
That's a really good question as well. I love that question, because I think I've changed my answer about this like over the years and stuff. But at this point, I would say that one of the biggest things to look out for are people that you feel like you can be yourself around. If you find that you're like augmenting yourself or changing who you are to be accepted, to be liked, then that's a red flag, because that means that like you don't feel at ease. You don't feel like you're okay and you're as you are. Um, so that would be a tip. Obviously, you can't be your like full, parody peacock self in every situation, because that's not appropriate. Like, you go into the workplace and maybe you modify your expression a little bit because it fits the environment, and that's respectful. Or like, you go to church and you don't like scream Marilyn Manson songs. Like there's things that you like, you can do that in your own room if that's your thing. I personally don't like him, so I wouldn't. But I think that's a real easy thing to identify. That's not like, sometimes I find that the red flags are that can be really general. And you want to look for specifics, because then you're not just jumping to conclusions right away.
That makes sense.
Like, women will talk about guys and they'll be like, that's a red flag, or that's a red flag, and you're like, wait a minute, like let's look at this for a second, because sometimes people just have a bad day. Like, you have to look at the accumulation of somebody's behavior and how it affects you.
Love that.
India's story is a powerful testament to the resilience of the human spirit. After years of psychological manipulation, pain, and loss of self, she has reclaimed her life. Her insight on losing yourself to please others is a profound reminder of the importance of staying true to who you are. Her story proves that healing is possible, self-worth can be rebuilt, and even in the darkest chapters, there is hope. We hope that India's courage in sharing her truth inspires strength for anyone facing their own struggles.
I wanted to do a little game. It's kind of like a fill in the blank. And
love this.
basically, I'm just going to have you finish the sentence. So, a moment in my life when I truly felt empowered was blank.
This is silly, but when I first got out of the group, I would go just like, and as an act of defiance, to candy stores and buy bags of candy and just walk around New York City eating malt balls. And that was like one of my first big fuck yous.
I love that. Okay, so I feel like for anyone that hasn't seen The Vow or isn't aware,
Yes.
they had you guys on very strict diets, correct?
Let's call it like crazy high control, like pimp and prostitute shit, where people will be like, you have to ask my permission in order to eat. So yeah, it was really fucked up. And this was my
Really
way.
intense.
Yeah, and this was my way of being like, fuck you, I'm gonna eat this.
I'm going to eat this whole
Yeah.
bag of candy and y'all can't stop me.
Yeah.
I love that.
I felt-
That's an empowering moment.
Yeah.
One habit that has helped me most in my healing journey is blank.
Learning to laugh.
If I could tell my younger self one thing, it would be,
Don't worry, everything will all work out.
that's a good one. If I had to describe my healing process in one word, it would be,
Tumultuous.
I feel that. A song or a piece of music that will always uplift me is,
Carole King.
okay, the biggest misconception people have about resilience is,
That it's not scary.
love that. This has brought us to our last segment of the show, which is Live, Laugh, Lie. So we've got 3 questions, starting with, if you could live that part of your life over again, what would you do differently?
I would have gone to school. Like gone to college.
Wow.
And stayed. I went, but I stayed for 1 year and I didn't study something that like was really grasping me. I think I would have looked harder for something that would have really like excited me.
Totally. I love that. Is there anything that makes you laugh when you look back on your story?
I mean, this is gonna make us probably laugh, but like how extreme it was. like it wasn't just like a normal like, oh yeah, she, effed the wrong guy once. It was like
Right.
so much more extreme and crazy that they made Lifetime movies out of it.
It was very intense. It was very intense.
So I have to laugh at that.
Yeah, I love that you can laugh through the pain. Okay, and then the last question is, what is the worst lie you've ever told?
Oh. Oh God. I'm a really bad liar, so that's part of it is like even when I'm lying, I'm
That's a
like
good
nervous.
thing.
I'm nervous about people finding out.
That's a good thing.
Wait,
I
maybe
feel like
that's
whenever
that will be my lie. Is like I'm lying and I think that people are gonna find out. Is that a lie?
that's fair. Honestly,
Okay.
I'll
I'm like
take
telling
it
them like
because I
no,
love
I
that.
can't. No, I can't meet you because I'm doing something, and then I'm like ah.
Oh my gosh, that's so me. I totally feel that. That's actually so funny. Okay, I wanted to give your podcast a little shout out. It's called Still
you.
Learning.
Yeah, it is. I appreciate that.
Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, and I'll tell you one thing is that I put out 1 season of that podcast and I really loved it, but I self-produced it and paid for it. And I was like, maybe this isn't for me right now. Like it was so much work. So I really like good on you for doing such a good job at this. But
thanks.
I'm more interested at this point in promoting my book.
Let's hear it.
And it's also called Still Learning. And I just put it out in print while I was pregnant. I edited the audio transcript and added some new things to it that are like reflective. And I'm really excited because I didn't think that I was going to have a physical book.
Oh, amazing. That's so exciting. When did you write that?
I wrote this starting in 2019 to 2020, and it really started as just like me feeling so scared about what had just happened that I had to write it because I was it was too hard to even speak about at first. And then the writing was more like a journaling exercise for me to just have some privacy, and then it turned into a memoir. So that's what I've got going, and I'm really proud of it.
That's so amazing. Okay, so everyone go check out her book.
Yeah, like lots of red flags in there. If you are questioning a relationship, this may clear it up.
Love that. Okay, that is amazing. So everyone go check out Still Learning. Thank you so much for coming on today and being vulnerable. I feel like it's still such a wild story. And even though it's technically been like 5-6 years since it was dissolved, I can't imagine. The past 5 years feel like a blur to me. Like it feels like it was yesterday. So I imagine for you as well, time is such a weird thing. And so I really appreciate you being open to coming on here and talking about it and letting us hear your story and hearing from you. Like, I'm so proud of you. I think you're such an amazing person, and I'm so excited for this next chapter of your life.
Thank you so much.
Where can people find you?
I'm on Instagram at India Oxenberg, and that's pretty much all the social media I can handle, so you can find me there.
I love it. Amazing. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
This podcast has been brought to you by Podcast Nation.